I'm going to start now, yeah?
Okay. Okay, hi there everyone. Firstly, apologies if there was you've been waiting a little while. We just had a few technical issues on getting the screens up and ready, but we're all ready to go now. So Janet and I, who are two of the careers advisors here, are going to sort of lead on this session here for you today. And yeah, we're going to just be talking to you about the personal statement here. We are going to be running through some slides here. I mean, these aren't slides that we've produced. They're produced by Unifrog, which I'm sure you're kind of familiar with. So we'll be using those as a very kind of sort of rough guide, really, because this is sort of an approach to doing the personal statement. But you know, we are going to talk to you a lot about the research side of this as well, because I know from students I've met recently, you may not be ready to write your statement. So we are going to be talking, I suppose, organically about university and research subjects and how that fits into your personal statement. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Janet?
Yep, I totally agree. I think this session really is a kind of an introduction to further support that we're going to be offering you when you return in September. But it really is to give you a heads up on what to kind of think about and start to plan how you're going to start structuring it.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully you're all familiar with Unifrog. I mean, this is again one approach, I suppose, to university research, but it's a really good tool. I mean, as the careers advisors here in Angel Campus, we're getting our heads around it as well. So we are sort of learning with you as you go along. But from what we've seen, I mean, it is crammed, packed full of really good resources. So hopefully you're familiar with it. So we're just going to reinforce some of the things on here for you today.
Yeah, I think the main thing, sorry, just to kind of add to what Ben's saying. So obviously on this particular slide, it's flagging up the kind of the go-to initial kind of section to go on to on your Unifrog, which is the know-how library. And I think that just gets you really kick-started in terms of kind of navigating your way through the actual portal. And it really kind of warms you up in terms of, you know, key links and information. So you're pretty much on Unifrog, that is the best kind of icon to kind of click into initially.
Yeah. I mean, this is really, moving on to the next slide here. I mean, I've done this in year 12, more suppose online appointments. Obviously, we are seeing students face to face here as well. I mean, I've done this with students going through these parts of Unifrog, and I would say, you know, it's great, it's brilliant. There are loads of things here that can really, I suppose, when you're thinking about university research, you know, Janet and I delivered lots of talks to you at the start of the academic year around options, and then we did a second talk around researching university, and it's a big decision. Okay, it's a big decision because there are over 50,000 different degree combinations out there, and there are not 50,000 A levels. So the sort of career decision you've made, and I'm just thinking back to a student I was with yesterday, and you know, this is a student, you know, I've met a couple of times, and we were talking through her ideas and plans and what she was thinking, and her situation is that she's kind of just really at this point here where she's kind of not sure yet of what she wants to study, but she's sure she wants to go to uni. Okay, so that I suppose is a key element to think about. I mean, if you want to go to university, it should be that you're keen to do more academic study. That should be the fundamental part of your thinking. And we did make it quite clear, didn't we, Janet, in the previous talks, about going to university isn't about deciding what career you want to do. I see that quite a lot, and I see students often getting in a bit of a muddle with that. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think really there are many strands to your thought processes, and I think ultimately you need to be happy with what it is you're going to embark on for those 3 or 4 years. And I think the career service, we are here to support you every step of the way in terms of your planning and thinking, and obviously regarding the personal statement, that can only kick into touch once you kind of are clearer about what you want to do. So we really don't want to put pressure on the personal statement element at this stage, but it's more about kind of ensuring that it's working in tandem with your thoughts in terms of what you could particularly study moving forward. So it's almost like have it at the back of your mind that the personal statement will kick in, but also more importantly think about what it is you want to study. So I think, yeah, it's just definitely trying to keep those two things juggled at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely right. Like, I mean, yeah, there's real, I mean, don't come out of this, obviously this session we're doing today, and there's another session as well we're doing today for drop-in and stuff, you know, drop-in questions and stuff. And Janet's right, you know, there should be a kind of organic process with this. But many of you, and I think this is a, you know, Unifrog's one of these products that's available, but isn't it true, Janet, that nothing's going to tell you what to do, is it? Nothing's going to give you a menu. Nothing's going to, this is like example of the student I was with yesterday, you know, she was a bit like, well, you know, I'm still not sure, I've still got lots of ideas, and that's completely fine. But the key point to say about this moving forward, again, these parts of Unifrog, which we've looked at here, these are great resources to go into and to go deeper into. And for lots of you as students, I know when we look at our kind of sort of patterns of our destinations and what people apply for and things like that, it's a surprise that even though we have so many different combinations of subjects, the types of subjects you pick for your university choices, and obviously then subsequently you have to write your statement for it, are quite similar. I mean, obviously they're across so many different areas. They can range from creative pathways to quite traditional pathways. You can have quite new and interesting degree courses. I mean, cyberspace is the one that I've seen a few over the last 5 or 6 years. Wouldn't have seen that 10 years or so ago. So you can be really creative with your thinking. But some students, don't they, Joan, they come straight back to thinking, I mean, this is the subject I'm really interested in. I love my English literature, or I love my chemistry A level.
Yeah, or psychology.
Or,
yeah.
And that's why it goes back to that point, and that's the key point to reiterate. Don't get kind of, I suppose, trapped in this thinking that what you do at uni should define what you need to do for your career. Because certainly on your personal statement, you don't need to be showing justification of what you want to do for a job or career. You can show some, I think, in the sort of maybe final paragraph, isn't it, Janet? Penultimate paragraph, you can allude a bit to your ideas, but no uni is going to be wanting hard evidence on that, really. Yeah. So I mean, I suppose what we're just trying to say, if you feel you're still at this point of your research and statements, you know, is something you're not quite there yet. I mean, still keep going on this part of Unifrog, isn't it, really, Janet?
Yeah, because this particular element of Unifrog will help you in your thinking alongside the support from Ben and I. So I think really it's about exploring, taking the quiz, you know, doing the profile, looking at the different subjects in the subject library, you know, getting a deeper understanding of self in terms of the personality quiz and how it matches with your skills, and obviously looking at the library as well. So hopefully all of those things put together will help you get to that point where you kind of have a clearer idea as to who you are and what you want to do. So it's more about self and situation, really, rather than career aspirations. But
I'll just say, last point before we move on to the next slide, I would say, you know, even if you're quite sure what you want to do, maybe if you know it's, you know, this psychology degree or this law degree, popular options, you know, make sure you do these parts. Make sure you go deep, because in fact it may just reinforce that. And that's a nice feeling to have, isn't it? To have that. Again, it's not going to tell you, yes, you should do an English degree and do this, but it's going to reinforce that element, and that's going to help you and inspire you around your statement, isn't it? I think.
And it also supports your tutors when they're actually looking at your Unifrog account to actually see your distance traveled in your thinking as well. And also we can also have a look at it as well. So it actually helps all of us to support you better if you actually start to populate and work through it.
Okay, well, let's move on to a few more.
Yeah, so this slide was just literally a screen grab, which just highlights exactly what we've talked about. So again, you can see all the different color coded icons, subjects, library, interests, personality profile, and you can always save and go back to it. So that's just a visual, just to kind of explain what it is we've been talking about.
Can I add on these as well, Jan? I mean, when I was looking at this about a month ago, I really liked the webinars part of it. Really interesting. You know, with all of you in this kind of, we've spent this session talking about COVID things, but with kind of difficulty of going to visit universities and stuff, you're more reliant on technology, aren't you, in terms of the research side of it. So, you know, there's some really good resources here, really, you know, really interesting things. And the MOOCs as well are fantastic as well. So go deeper into those as well. Okay. Do you want to cover this one, Janet?
Yeah, so I think really the key thing there is, I think we always say, embarking on a journey towards higher education is actually an exciting prospect. It's not something to get stressed about. It's not something to really get anxiety over. We're here to support you every step of the way. So really, it's a time to get inspired, really. I think that's the key thing, to understand that all of these tools have been designed to support you. Okay, and you know, the emphasis is on actually creating shortlists. So you can create various types of shortlists on Unifrog. For example, you can save a shortlist for apprenticeships, for example, and go back to it. You can save job alerts, you can create job alerts, you know, so you can, you know, there are ways in which you can kind of keep a tab, because I think one thing, a lot of students get quite overwhelmed with research, and I always advise either a good old-fashioned pen and paper in a notebook, but Unifrog has kind of revolutionized that whole notebook theory, because you can actually save any courses and universities that you are interested in and go back to it. So it kind of helps you mentally to kind of keep focused on where you are at that particular moment. So for example, you were interested in exploring, I don't know, history, for example, you could like bookmark certain universities and create a shortlist on the sorts of courses that you're interested in, for example. So it does help you to kind of navigate your way through in between stages. And I think really it's about giving you that inspiration to think about what your strengths are. You know, where do you shine in terms of your kind of academic prowess? You know, are you somebody that really loves exploring kind of data analytics and things like that? Or are you somebody that really loves to explore the kind of like the research intensive style kind of courses? Or are you somebody that enjoys reading and kind of like literature and the kind of the written style more your strength? So I think really it's just getting you to think about where your strengths are really in terms of the types of course you want. Or is it something that you want more hands-on, more practical, more vocational kind of courses like media, for example, whereby you may want to explore media theory, for example, whereby it's more essay based, or whether it's more practical like media production. So really it's about working alongside your skills and strengths and tailoring your personal statement to match that particular course as well. If you wanted to add to that, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just move on to this next slide about getting noticed, permission staff. I mean, it's about getting noticed for the right reasons, though, isn't it? As well. I mean, this is sort of I very much agree with the points Janet was making there about, you know, using Unifrog as a resource. But some of you might want to see this old-fashioned pen and paper approach, isn't it, of writing your ideas down. Once you've got a structure, you know, and the Unifrog things, the slide we're going to look at in a minute, which we've been given here to sort of talk you through, they are good. But this isn't the only way. This isn't like the Oracle to do your personal statement. It's an example of one that you can be using, and it's quite difficult, isn't it, Janet, sometimes to give sort of personal statement advice generally across the board, because you're applying for different sorts of courses.
That's right.
And as Janet alluded to there, if you're a student applying for a vocational course, and Janet used a sort of media example there, but if you're someone applying for a vocational course, I don't know, like an NHS type course, like medicine, dentistry, or radiography, or teaching, or anything like that, you've got to have quite a kind of middle part of your statement, which has more of a reflection on your experiences. And if you're applying for a very, I suppose, more conventional, I suppose, you know, like written-based course, you know, they may just be looking at your kind of examples that show your strengths in that subject area, so your academic interests. When you're applying for other sorts of courses, they might be looking at your understanding of that job role, isn't it? So it does vary from course to
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, because you're right about the evidence section on your personal statement. You know, if it's literally a like for like nursing, midwifery, or anything in the NHS, they're definitely going to want to see some demonstration of examples, clear examples of shadowing or enrichment, that you've kind of can kind of mirror that experiences with the course that you're interested in. But having said that as well, I think evidence is still key with humanities subjects.
Yeah.
So even if you were looking to embark on history or English, for example, they would still expect to see some level of evidence of your interest in the actual subject. So obviously there isn't a history work experience, so there isn't English literature work experience, so to speak, but you could show it in other ways. So for example, you know, for many of you, hopefully you would have signed up for university taster days. So you may have attended a really fascinating session from a university, for example, of Goldsmiths or wherever, and there may be some really poignant things that you may have learned regarding that particular webinar or seminar that you've attended, that you could extract and put on your personal statement. So that is still evidence in itself, although it's not work experience per se. It's evidence that you are really keen and passionate about the course. So there are always ways and means around extracting evidence in whatever we do.
Yeah.
Doesn't always have to be a like for like.
Yeah. So this slide here gives you, you know, about recording examples, okay, competencies, and it's a good example there that things can be used for your CV and stuff as well, because there is a sort of character. I don't know if you're aware of this, I'm sure you're probably aware of it. You need to find all this information out on there now, obviously, but there's a limited character space on your statement. In that 4,000 character space, I mean, visually, it's about a page and a bit. If you think about normal font size, font 11, it's about a page and a small paragraph. So there are some things there within Unifrog you can use to, you know, and things like that, but it will vary from course to course. And that 4,000 character space, by the way, doesn't mean that you can mean students sometimes, don't they, Janet, they think about their paragraph spacing and things like that, and kind of you know, and big bugbear for me, you'll notice this if you see me quite a lot with I've got quite a sort of big thing on attention to detail, and students often use things like they'll write numbers in numbers as opposed to written things, and things like that just don't look good grammatically, even if you're thinking you're saving on characters. So and some students will, often when they're applying for a very competitive course, they might think they need to use as much of those 4,000 characters as possible, and maybe have a statement that's quite condensed, and I find that quite difficult to read if a student, you know, if you're helping them with drafting process. So I mean, I'm not sure whether these slides talk about drafting, but I mean, I would say, I mean, that's really important, isn't it, Janet, in terms of the statement, don't you think, in terms of
and also get as many people as you can to look over it as well. There'll always be something that somebody can highlight or point out to you, and it's just being very mindful of how you're writing it and your audience as well, because obviously you want to impress, you know, the head of faculty that you are keen on the course. So it's about knowing your audience as well, and framing it accordingly. Really important. And also and avoid being, I mean, my certain things that I've corrected on certain personal statements are things like being non-judgmental as well, just being very mindful of how you use language. You know, for example, if you're kind of citing a particular piece of research or literature, for example, just be very mindful how you extract that information, and that you're not putting any value judgment on it. So it's that fine line between not being too political or not kind of offending any particular group as well. So that has come up as well. So just be mindful about the audience that you're writing for. But we're happy to have a look at your personal statement. So but it's just about getting that balance right.
It's a very good point, isn't it? I mean, it can obviously vary from course to course, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think another example of that I can give is when I think we were talking about this in the careers room the other day in another context of like using humour, isn't it, and things like this.
Fine line.
It might be funny to you,
Yeah.
but again, you're likely to be a different generation of the person reading the statement. So they may not get it or even understand it and stuff. So it's not that we're trying to say make it bland and boring, because that wouldn't be but we're in the game here for you to get offers and for you to get success and progression. So we know,
and also, sorry, there's also a fine line where certain personal statements, for example, again, this is a fine line, so it's very difficult to generalize, because if you get it right, it can work for you, but sometimes some personal statements border into becoming a manifesto. And it can border into the wrong territory of sounding like, when I was 7, I always had a passion for politics, and through growing up, I realized these injustices that I faced in my own life. And then it suddenly goes down a road that they cannot then rein back in. So just, again, these are things to just be mindful of. But again, we are here to kind of have a look at that as well.
Yeah.
So it's not a manifesto.
Yeah. I think it's kind of almost, isn't it, Janet, sort of rein it in a little bit, or just kind of make sure it's kind of, we Janet and I have worked, around UCAS and university stuff for so many years that we know kind of, it's almost like you can just tell when like you read it, can't you? You can tell if it's a first draft or so, and that's fine. And it's almost like on another side of the coin, I think I was discussing this with Janet yesterday when we were talking about this talk, I was saying, if I read a first or second draft of a statement that was too polished or too finished, I would be a little bit suspicious. So it should be quite an organic process for you, in that by the time you're getting to the latter drafts of your statement, you're almost sick to the sight of this statement, but the way it reads is going to jump out the page. And it's actually, and the analogy I use for students quite a lot, is that it can be read quickly. Yeah, very quickly. So that if an admissions tutor, he or she had to read 100 of these in a morning, they can glance over it, they can skim it. And that sounds harsh, when the fact that you've probably spent a lot of time and you've kind of agonized over certain sentences or phrases. But if it reads well, and I can scan your statement and read it in about 20-30 seconds, sounds harsh, but if I can read it and scan it and I can go tick 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 tick, that's where we can come in, obviously, and you're obviously teachers here to make sure it can be, scanned, but kind of still be viewed really, really positively. Okay. Now, some of these next slides, I'm not going to go too much detail into these, because obviously we've sort of alluded to these, haven't we, on so this was just an example here of how you can utilize examples of personal statements on Unifrog by using the subjects library. So if you I've just circled that here in the subjects library. If you just click to the next slide, please, Ben. So I put, for example, English. So as an example. Okay, if you go to the next slide. And then I've gone to statement. So that's just going to be personal statement. To the next slide. So again, you can see here, this is on Unifrog. So it's given an example of an annotated UK personal statement. And they've even given a little synopsis in terms of where they received offers from. And again, it's given an example through literature. I live a different life, gain new perspective on the world, etc., etc., etc. Learning about the struggles of modern teens and blah, 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 blah. So it's just giving you a little bit of an example. And there's actually further examples moving further down on this particular slide. I've just given you this as an example. So there are kind of templates that can inspire you to give you some thoughts on how you could draft yours by subject. So that subject icon that we just showed you is a really useful one to get you started on how to kind of what kind of noises a personal statement can make by subject. So it's actually a really good one, but obviously don't copy it. I'm sure you won't. But yeah, it's a really good example, so you can do it by subject. Yeah, that's a really good. I like the expression there, noises, Janet. That's really good. I like that. I mean, as I said, I think, isn't it, Janet? So often you see with students, the kind of opening paragraph, isn't it, is this big kind of, psychological stumbling block, isn't it, in lots of ways? And kind of, how do you start? How do you approach it? And going back to a point Janet made about 5 minutes ago, a bit of a bugbear with me a little bit. It's not a bugbear with the wrong way. Is when sometimes a statement reads a bit like a diary entry, yeah, of how they've come to this decision in their life, which sounds like, oh, that could be the way to approach a statement. I need to demonstrate to admissions tutor the organic decision in my life of how I've come to this. And as we know with many of you, there may not be a kind of trigger point of when you were 7 with your chemistry set and that made you always be life isn't like that, you know. So and there's a sort of style, isn't there, Janet, to the kind of how you would write. And you know, if you were the example of this which Janet has used here is really good, like, I mean, using love and, you know, passion. You know, if you remember one thing from today's talks, you know, I don't know how many times I highlight the word passion in a statement and say take it out. It sounds like we're being really quite pedantic, but it's the most overused word in personal statements, and it's seen as a kind of it's seen as quite a lazy word to use, I think, in lots of ways. So it's just overused, isn't it? So
yeah, totally. And I think the key thing is to be authentic. I think, you know, everybody has a click moment, but I think where people go wrong, like Ben was just saying, is when they try and romanticize it. I think the reality is we all have a click moment, and it could be a case of, you know, I keep saying English because I studied English, so please forgive me, guys. But it's like, for example, my click moment would be that I actually loved writing stories, you know, or I was always fascinated by the art of storytelling on documentaries. So that's my example, but it's not once upon a time I went down the fields in a country lane and I suddenly I heard a voice from far away, far from the madding crowd that inspired me to start writing. So really, it's just about how you frame it. If you're authentic, it does come through. It honestly does. So don't overthink it. It's personal to you, hence why it's a personal statement. So be authentic, and really just showcase. And it is a good skill to learn, because your personal statement is the first step towards your CV, to any applications that you might apply for any jobs or for an apprenticeship, for example. So it's a really good kind of 47 lines about you and why, and it teaches you how to structure that. So it is a formula that you can learn.
Yeah. I thought your once upon a time story there sounded quite good, Janet.
Did it?
Yeah.
Apart from the far from the madding crowd, did you not think that sounded a bit corny?
But you know, this is again, this is specific to you and the subject you're applying for, and yeah, I mean, and just a key point to say on this about using resources now in Uniform, which are good, and Janet's alluded to this, and like we would have examples of that. And I for example, if I have a student applying for a very competitive course, I've often got examples of statements of successful students on my records here. And what I always do with a student is I never email it to them. I never print it off of them. I actually let them sit in my room, or now you have to probably sit outside for a bit until things change. But I just sort of say, read it, close it, sort of engage in it, and then you kind of work out your own. So you hopefully the things you see will inspire you, because I'm sure you might have read this already, but I'm nothing alluded to. So be very, very careful that UCAS does have a tracking. Every personal statement ever written is kind of in some database, and they can annotate whether you've taken too much of things from something else. So Janet alluded to earlier about the pen and paper thing. You are going to need to actually physically write this on a blank bit of paper or on a blank screen in the first instance. And I would say maybe not to try and think about in this day and age, Janet, isn't it? You see people doing everything on their phones. I wouldn't really, don't see it that much. Often, I mean, things will be a bit different now, and things a bit different in the world at the moment. But years gone by, what normally happened, a student would come into the careers room here with a printed copy of their statement, and you'd kind of look at it. I would try and think more around that, or printing, or probably not writing, but you may not want to write it. But don't put it, don't sort of text it on your phone. I would say I don't think that's the right. Don't you think, Janet, to sort of start a statement? What do you think?
It's a different world, Ben.
I know people might. I know you may think about putting notes together, like, and you mean I don't think that's a bad idea, personally. Yeah. I'm just conscious of you just writing it all as a sort of like the mindset of when you do work, isn't it? You probably go onto a laptop or you go onto a tablet, don't you? I would say you need to. So the point I'm making, Janet, is they need to approach this statement in the same way you would a piece of A-level coursework or stuff. Don't see it as maybe if you're on the tube going home or the bus and I mean, you, and after the day, you think, what things might I write about? That's fine on your phone, but really getting that mindset of it being, because it is, it's a really important part of this whole.
And I think also what also helps students as well is if they kind of see it as subheadings that they work on. So sometimes I suggest to students to compartmentalize their personal statement so that they're not looking at it as one big huge chunk of writing, which sometimes can be so overwhelming. So sometimes it's best to just look at it as different compartments. So it could be like, okay, so today I'm going to tackle, why from an enrichment perspective, because a personal statement is just totally obsessed with why. Why do you want to do this course? And it just comes from different strands. So once you've nailed down those different strands, so why from your click moment, why from an academic perspective, why from an enrichment perspective, why from a commercial awareness perspective, why from future aspirations and hobbies and interests perspective. Once you've got all those whys in kind of subheadings, then you can just attack them as and when that you feel that you can, as opposed to going for it all in one go. So if you just put it into bite-sized chunks and work on it as and when, little and often, as I always say with careers, little and often, it doesn't feel so daunting. So, and then before you know it, when you've taken away all those subheadings, you've actually got your personal statement there right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel so daunting if you do it that way as well.
That's a really good point. I think there's a couple of slides in a minute where Unifrog are giving you some examples of what kind of what them subheadings and things can be.
Yeah.
And there is quite a as I said, there is quite a universal structure to a statement. And sort of alluding to it here, isn't it? In lots of ways, in some of the bullet points here. I mean, beginning, middle, and end. I mean, that's again, and that sounds
that's
obvious,
right.
But it's beginning, middle, and end. But what I'm saying, what I said earlier about like vocational courses and stuff, the middle of your statement might vary a little bit on the type of. And what I would say, I don't think alluded to on this slide, just a bit of advice about statements. I really want to make sure we say here. Be aware that sometimes, depending on the sort of course you're applying for, the place you're applying for, it doesn't all have to be about why the course. I think that's sometimes where a student might get, where do I get the evidence of further about my interest in English literature or psychology or chemistry, or maybe it's a course, a kind of new course. You can have things on your statement, which in the middle part of your statement, which shows you as a good candidate to go to uni, I would say. Yeah. So I would say a good balance for, if there's a course, let's say a course, I don't know, maybe a non-Russell Group university that asks for 3Bs or BBC or ABB, which could be a lot of you. Okay, that sort of course it'd be absolutely fine if there was a sort of 60-40% split, 60% on course interest, 40% on maybe, or 40-30% maybe. And what I'm getting at there is you can talk about things like your job or your enrichment or your volunteering or your positions of responsibility, which may not necessarily be why the course, but they show that you've got really good skills which will be applied and relevant when you go to uni. And what I'm getting at there is, when you go to university, whatever you study, university is not any harder than A levels. What's harder about university is it's a lot of spinning plates, isn't it, Janet? It's a lot of being able to do a lot of things at the same time. And if you can show in your statement you already spin a lot of plates, yeah, and it's not necessarily that this spinning a plate is related to your course, it's showing a university that yes, this is an applicant who's will know how to multitask. They've got good time management skills. They've got good organisational skills. So that's a key point I would say to you on some of the sort of middle parts of your statement. Don't feel frightened.
So I think, let me just add to that, because I don't want to confuse them. So I think it's more of a subliminal why. So it's not as obvious as why because I want to do that course, why because it's linked to that course, but it's more subliminal, because once you do those subheadings, what you'll find is that they are standalone paragraphs, but they all stand out in terms of evidence as to why you want to do that course. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's more subliminal as opposed to linking, as Ben said, linking it directly to the course. It's more of an overview, but all of those key elements make you shine in their own right. So like the Duke of Edinburgh Award,
Yeah.
you don't have to literally link it, but it speaks for itself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it speaks for
And
itself.
this is where it can get a bit confusing, Jan, isn't it? Because
It can.
because Unifrog will have a sort of approach to it here, yeah. And I just want to reiterate that this is an approach, and it is a good approach, but it's not the only. It's not like here in the college we're saying Unifrog style for your statement, bust or has to be, if there is a sort of, beginning, middle, and end to your statement which shows your interest in that subject area.
Yeah.
Use these tools here, and again, Unifrog is one, as I said, but it's one that we're promoting in the college because we think it will help you.
Yeah. It will help with the structure.
Yeah.
Definitely will help with the structure, and for a lot of students, they struggle with that. So it's a really good starting point.
Yeah.
And it gives that kind of fodder for somebody to have a look at and make amendments on. Yeah. So it is a really good start.
Yeah. Now I was thinking this morning, Janet, something that comes up quite a lot with statements, and I'm going to reveal a bit of a secret personal statement trick here.
A secret? Is it a big reveal, Ben?
Well, it's not things everyone's aware of. But I'm going to say it in this, even though it's being recorded. I mean, when you have, when we're saying to you here as students, you need to think about your research and what you're going to apply for. And just to reiterate, this doesn't mean that if you're applying for, say, let's use an example again, psychology or English, business management, these sorts of things. Now, what we were saying earlier about your choices in your statement should kind of mirror in together, but your choices don't have to be exactly the same. So they don't have to say the exact course title, but there certainly should be a pattern, shouldn't there, Janet? Yeah, there certainly should be a flavour to your choices that fits in with your statement. And from time to time, isn't it, Janet, you have a student that says to you, I'm really interested in applying for these sort of multiple courses, isn't it? And it can get a bit confusing with the statement, isn't it?
Yeah, because your script should be succinct. Your 47 lines should be aligned with your 5 choices.
Yeah.
And it makes for a really, really tricky personal statement if you've got lots of different random courses on one space. So
the kind of little trick I want to just alert you to, and you'll probably never find this. It's just something. I mean, I know, as being a Janet would know as well, that sometimes, and I'm not promoting you to do something you to be aware of, is there is a way of doing separate personal statements, and I don't want to confuse you with it. But it's just something you should be aware of if you're an applicant who really gets to the point where you can't decide. And I'm just saying, if you had if a different course you still wanted to apply for, there is a way that you can contact the university and you could send a supplementary statement outside of UCAS. Okay, so you would have your statement more driven to the majority of your choices. So I'm not in any way promoting for you to do that. I'm just wanting you to be aware that there is a bit of flexibility, there is a bit of leeway, but you would never write 2 statements within your UCAS application. Yeah. I think if that's the case with you, you need to really make an appointment with Janet, all right?
I think so.
Yeah, because it may be that you don't have to, but it does happen from time to time with students, doesn't it, Janet? Every year that one of Janet or I might be working a bit more with the other, and then we look at their choices and we're like, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. And they're like, oh yeah, I've contacted that uni and I found I can do it outside of UCAS. So there is a way, but personally, your research should really about there being a consistent pattern within your choices, isn't there, really? And that should really lead into this organic process of your statement.
Yep, totally agreed. And I think this is why we give these talks now, so that you've got that window of opportunity. It's not panic stations. You've got time to reflect, research, and work out who you are and where you want to be. So you do have the time to do that. So don't worry or don't panic at this stage.
Okay, so I think that's as far as we're going to go in this session here today. I don't know whether can we pick up comments or questions on here, because we've got a bit of time. I mean, there is going to be another talk. There's a sort of drop-in talk that Janet and I are doing today, from 12 to 1, where there will be no PowerPoint, and we'll literally just answer questions you might have. If anyone has a question, do feel free to Put it in the chat if you can. What would
There's no questions so far, Ben. So I think obviously it was very comprehensive. So I think we'll end. Obviously, if you put your questions in there after we end it, we will still be able to see them. But yeah.
I hope you found that useful. Said you may want to have a think about things for after this talk, and said come into the next session at 12 o'clock, and again it'll be a far more informal session there as well. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much all. Bye bye.